Hi Paul, thanks for the footage. Looking forward to getting stuck into this one. Popped a few lines on here already just to save a bit of time as we start to work our way through this. Obviously, because you've booked a series of lessons, this is going to be a little bit more of a work in progress, so I don't want to address everything in one hit. I am going to touch on a few little areas that we will we will work on in subsequent sessions, and then I'll just summarise and give you the main thing to work on after this lesson. So, first of all, I like the way you set up to it to a point. I think a couple of things we need to look at here are that the trail arm can get a little bit too straight, which will then cause the trail shoulder to come forward and the shoulders to get slightly misaligned. So there's quite a difference between the stance line and the body line when viewed from down the line. You can see here that that trail arm gets very straight. This can also make it difficult to load things properly during the backswing, so the trail arm tends not to load quite as incrementally as you would want it to. Sometimes that's the product of a weak trail hand grip, not the case in your case. It's just more of an attention to detail feel like, as opposed to working on softening the arm up, feel like you pull the trail shoulder back a little bit. Now, the act of doing that will reposition the trail elbow and give that trail arm just a little bit more bend in it. Model numbers would be around about maybe 10 degrees of bend in that trail arm. I wouldn't get too anal about that. We just need a little bit more than what we've got. The other change that I would make at P1, and again, it's going to help with that trail arm, is the pelvis needs to be pushed forward a couple of inches so that the centre of the pelvis is favouring the front portion of the stance. At the moment, you've got a red and a yellow arrow coming down there. You can see that the centre of the shoulder turn and the centre of the pelvis are almost too well aligned. Now, for some players, that's fine. For a player like yourself, I wouldn't have that as my preferred setup position. I would have the lower centre favouring the front portion of the stance, maybe sort of 2 inches ahead of centre, and I would have the upper centre, the centre of the shoulders, in line with the centre of the stance. Now, a few little things that happen during your swing. It's a relatively wide arc, so I'm just going to play this from face on first. So there's not much loading of the wrists during the backswing. The trail knee works down the foot line for too long. Now, this is something that often gets misinterpreted when reading the book or watching the DVDs. We don't want the lead knee to work inwards because that will cause the pelvis to slide away from the target and result in potential, some players would move out with the head, other players would try and sort of overextend and side bend to keep the head more stable, but it's certainly going to cause stability issues. So what we actually talk about is having the lead knee flex towards the target line, and this is a key distinction, a little bit more. Now, we're not saying for 1 minute that it needs to continuously flex towards the target line. As the pelvis rotates, that will bring the lead knee in. Now, you're also going to be extending at this point, so we need, as it comes in, we need it to also flex forward. So you should have a situation for yourself where this lead knee works inwards and towards the target line. That's going to facilitate a much better movement with the pelvis and also reduce the rate at which you side bend. So as we take this club back, we can see that your head sort of moves around within that circle a little bit too much, so it goes down. So we're sort of side bending at too fast a rate. The lead knee's not working in an appropriate manner. The other thing that you tend to get is you tend to get the trail leg straightening a little bit too much, a little bit too soon. So whilst that sounds a lot, all I'm going to ask you to do is make sure that as the trail knee flexes put my teeth back in, as the lead knee works towards the target line, also allow it to come in. That's going to make managing this lead shoulder trajectory a little bit easier for you and should start to stabilise the head within that circle. So I'm just going to get rid of a few of those things. That's something we can keep our eye on as we go. Main concern at the moment is to, at P1, push the pelvis towards the target a couple of inches. As you do that, that's going to make the trail arm softer, but I also want you to feel like the trail shoulder is being pulled back a little bit. So for you, that may feel like the forearms and the shoulders are quite closed off. They won't be closed off, they'll just be less open than they normally are. Now, because of what we've just discussed, you're going to see as you get to the top of the backswing, there's a little bit of movement out of that circle. The thing we need to put us back in that circle is some extension. Unfortunately, unless this lead knee works in an appropriate manner, we're not going to get that. So as the lead knee flexes forward, it should be coming inwards because of the pelvis rotation. Now then, I'm going to get to the crux of your issues in regards to contact now. From down the line, we get into a pretty good position at P4. Just a touch more across the line than what we would deem as ideal. The main reason for that is because of the leg action we discussed earlier. So we should start to see that tidy up as the change in knee flex occurs in a different manner, as the pelvis is pushed further forward, and also as the trail side is softened up. Now, the big issue you've got relates to the face-on footage. There is a distinct widening of the arc very early in your downswing. So the radius of the swing is widening too much too soon. Wrist angles are coming out far too fast. The shaft is trying to line up with the lead arm far too quick, and now you divide the elbows to prevent the club from crashing into the ground. So we've got an arc that's widening too much too soon, and elbows that are dividing on the way through to prevent that club crashing into the ground. When we view it from down the line, we're going to see that the path the hands trace is pretty appropriate, but the shaft stays very high. Sweet spot, camera's a little bit blurred on this one, gets out in front of the hands. Whenever the sweet spot is out in front of the hands at P6, the radius of the swing is too wide. Now there's a distinct possibility you're going to hit the ground behind the ball, so you divide the elbows. If you look at the hand path through the hit, you trace an inward path with the hands. That would suggest that, like on this one, the ball's going to be struck occasionally severely at the toe end. We run the risk of, if we do straighten the arms, burying the club in the ground. As you divide the elbows, the lead wrist extends, which would open the face to the path. However, if you extend the lead wrist and roll the club too much, then what you've got now is a closing club face and a path that's going too much to the right in your case, which will cause that right, going right type shot that you're occasionally experiencing. The movement through the ball, you can see the head drifts forward and you flex forward a little bit too much, a little bit too soon. That's a byproduct of what you've been doing earlier in the downswing. So we need at setup the pelvis pushed forward more. We need the trail side to be softer, so more bend in the trail arm, a little bit more trail shoulder pulled back, just an inch or so. Then we need to work on tightening the radius of the swing. Now, most players don't spend enough time with the weight forward and to learn how to straighten out the arms effectively. Your weight is not quite forward enough, but P1 changes are going to address that. You have a situation where the arc is widening so much so soon, but that you couldn't possibly learn to straighten the arms out. So what we're going to do is going to get rid of all them lines now, and we're going to focus primarily on the face-on footage. We need to tighten this up, and we need to tighten this up quickly. So what we're going to do is, on the mat when you're practicing, hopefully you practice in this sort of environment, because when you're on a mat hitting into a net, the only two forms of feedback you've got are the mechanics and how they felt. and the quality of strike that you're going to create, which is very important for yourself. Now, once we get the contact better and more predictable and more consistent, then we can start to work on the direction a little bit more. However, the act of doing what I'm about to give you will start to produce a more predictable pattern. Now, initially, a more predictable pattern for you is going to be a more solid strike and one type of miss. So what we're going to do is we're going to, on the mat behind the ball that you're hitting, I want you to place a towel, a folded golf towel, and I want you to place it around about a grip's length behind the ball that you're hitting. So fold your golf towel up, position it in this area here. Now when you fold your towel up, I want it to be approximately the same height as your golf ball. As the arc widens, the angle of approach becomes too low. So as you're uncocking the wrists here now, your club would approach the ball too low to the ground because the radius is too wide. If you narrow the radius, you steepen the angle of approach. So the act of missing the towel is going to discourage the wrists from uncocking as fast as they are. It's going to encourage the lead arm to speed up and also the trail arm to straighten out in a different direction. So the hands will be much more on the trail leg at P6. The shaft of the club will be lower at P6. In order to achieve that, you have to maintain the wrist angles, you have to speed up the lead arm, and you also have to change the trajectory of the trail arm and the way in which it's straightening out. So it can straighten out in various directions. Yours is straightening out too much this way. Now all this will become or will be driven by the act of missing the towel that's folded up behind your golf ball. So fold the towel up so that it's approximately the same height as your golf ball. Position it approximately a grip's length behind the ball that you're going to hit. For this, use something like a 7-iron or an 8-iron. And your goal, apply the setup changes we've just discussed. Pelvis push forward, trail side softer. Every time you hit, your goal is to miss the towel. If you hit the towel, the wrist angles are coming out too fast. If the wrist angles are coming out too fast, the trail arm and lead arm aren't working in an appropriate manner. The club, is too far away from you at P6. The wrist will be uncocking too quick, which is the heavy one, stroke high rate of closure. And then the arms can start to learn to straighten, which is a huge part of hitting out at the ball appropriately, but also a massive part of making good contact. Hopefully that all makes sense to you. If you want to send some footage across of you practicing the drill before you start really getting into it, and then I can add some detail and just point you in the right direction if things need to be tweaked a little bit. Good luck with it. Any questions, feel free to drop me a line, and I look forward to watching this one progress over the coming weeks.